Ego is one of the most misunderstood forces in human psychology. Many people confuse ego with confidence, strength, or self-respect, but in reality, ego is something far more fragile and complex. Ego is the part of the mind that is constantly trying to protect an image of who we think we are. It is built from our fears, past wounds, comparisons, and the need to feel important, right, or superior. While ego often presents itself as power, it is usually rooted in insecurity. And because it operates quietly and persistently, it has the ability to ruin relationships, inner peace, growth, and even happiness without us fully realizing what is happening. From childhood, ego begins to form as a defense mechanism. When a child feels ignored, criticized, or unloved, the mind creates strategies to survive emotionally. These strategies later become ego patterns. Some people develop an ego that seeks control, others develop one that seeks validation, and some develop an ego that hides behind silence or emotional distance. At its core, ego is not evil, it is protective. But the problem arises when protection turns into domination and survival turns into self-sabotage. Ego thrives on comparison. It constantly measures worth by looking outward rather than inward. Am I better than them? Am I being respected enough? Do I look weak if I apologize? These questions run quietly in the background of the mind. The ego cannot exist in stillness because it needs conflict to feel alive. It feeds on competition, judgment, and separation. The moment we start comparing ourselves to others, ego steps in and begins shaping our behavior. One of the most destructive aspects of ego is its obsession with being right. The ego would rather be right than be at peace. It would rather win an argument than preserve a relationship. This is because admitting fault feels like a threat to identity. When ego dominates, apologies feel like humiliation and compromise feels like defeat. As a result, small disagreements turn into lasting resentment and meaningful connections slowly erode. Ego also distorts perception. It filters reality through personal bias, making us see ourselves as victims, heroes, or misunderstood geniuses, depending on what protects our self-image. This distortion prevents accountability. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" ego asks, "Why are they against me?" Instead of self-reflection, ego seeks external blame. Over time, this mindset blocks personal growth because growth requires honesty, and ego resists honesty when it threatens pride. In relationships, ego is especially damaging. Love, friendship, and trust require vulnerability, but ego fears vulnerability more than anything. To the ego, vulnerability looks like weakness. It avoids honest conversations, emotional openness, and empathy because these require lowering defenses. Instead, ego creates emotional walls, passive aggression, silence, or dominance. These behaviors may feel protective in the moment, but they slowly suffocate intimacy. Ego often disguises itself as self-respect. People say they are protecting their dignity when in reality they are protecting their pride. There is a difference between self-respect and ego. Self-respect is calm and grounded. Ego is reactive and loud. Self-respect allows dialogue. Ego demands obedience. When ego takes control, even constructive feedback feels like an attack, and healthy boundaries turn into rigid barriers. Another way ego ruins everything is by creating emotional distance. Ego makes people emotionally unavailable because closeness requires authenticity. Instead of expressing hurt, ego chooses silence. Instead of asking for reassurance, ego chooses withdrawal. Instead of admitting fear, ego chooses anger. These choices create misunderstandings and leave others feeling confused, rejected, or unloved. Ego is deeply connected to fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being insignificant, fear of being exposed. Every ego-driven reaction is an attempt to avoid one of these fears. When someone becomes defensive, controlling, or arrogant, it is often because they are afraid. Ego builds an illusion of strength to cover emotional vulnerability. Unfortunately, this illusion isolates rather than protects. In professional life, ego can destroy growth and collaboration. It prevents learning because learning requires admitting ignorance. Ego avoids mentorship, rejects feedback, and resists change. It convinces people that they already know enough, that others are less capable, or that asking for help is a sign of weakness. As a result, opportunities are missed, relationships with colleagues suffer, and progress slows. Ego also interferes with self-awareness. It creates a false narrative about who we are and why things happen to us. This narrative becomes so convincing that we stop questioning it. We see patterns of failure or conflict in our lives, but ego explains them away as bad luck or other people's faults. Without awareness, these patterns repeat endlessly. One of the most painful ways ego ruins everything is by blocking forgiveness. Forgiveness requires humility, empathy, and emotional strength. Ego sees forgiveness as surrender. It holds on to past wounds as proof of being wronged, using them to justify distance or resentment. While ego believes this protects dignity, it actually traps the mind in pain and prevents healing. Ego also creates loneliness. Even when surrounded by people, an ego-driven person often feels misunderstood or disconnected. This happens because ego does not allow true self-expression. When people interact with a guarded or performative version of us, they connect with the mask, not the person. Over time, this leads to a sense of emptiness and emotional isolation. The most ironic truth about ego is that it promises control but delivers chaos. It promises respect but creates conflict. It promises safety but produces anxiety. Ego is never satisfied because it is built on lack. No amount of validation is ever enough. No victory feels permanent. There is always another comparison, another threat, another insecurity to defend against. Letting go of ego doesn't mean losing identity or self-worth. It means separating worth from image. It means recognizing that being human includes making mistakes, feeling fear, and needing others. When ego softens, clarity increases. Conversations become honest. Relationships become lighter. Inner tension begins to dissolve. This process starts with awareness, noticing when reactions are driven by the need to protect pride rather than seek truth. Asking why an apology feels difficult, observing defensiveness without justifying it. Ego weakens when it is observed without judgment. True strength lies in emotional flexibility, the ability to listen without reacting, to admit mistakes without self-hate, and to choose peace over being right. When ego no longer dominates, empathy replaces judgment, curiosity replaces control, and connection replaces conflict. In the end, ego ruins everything not because it is powerful, but because it is afraid. It is afraid of being seen, of being ordinary, of being unimportant. When this fear runs the mind, life becomes a battlefield. When it is understood, life becomes a space for growth. The moment we stop letting ego lead, we begin to experience relationships, success, and inner peace as they were meant to be experienced, freely, honestly, and without constant inner struggle.